Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is my Forbes colleague, reporter Matt Craig. Matt, thanks so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me, Brittany. It's been too long since we've done one of these.
It has been too long, but we do have an exciting conversation today because the Tonys are this weekend, and someone who has the potential to have a good night, no pun intended, is George Clooney, the star of the show Good Night and Good Luck. And that's not the only accomplishment the show has really seen. You're reporting on some of the show's successes, particularly in the money department, so talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think, you say it could be a good night. To him, I say good luck on the Tonys. I don't know how many awards they're going to win. They did get 5 nominations, but on a per week basis, this show is going to go down as the highest grossing show, or non-musical, I should say, play on Broadway in the history of Broadway. Again, on a per week basis, because it's only running for 13 weeks. But it's grossed more than $3 million per week on average. And it's the first non-musical to ever hit that $4 million threshold per week. And it's done that 3 times. And in this last week, it probably will again. So 4 times in its run, which is really unprecedented. I mean, for most plays, $1 million in a week, that's considered a success. If you hit the $2 million per week threshold, that's a huge hit. And again, they're averaging over 3 and hitting $4 million a week. So this is a huge hit on Broadway. It's the toast of the town. And obviously him getting the Tonys is a nice cherry on top. The one thing I think it's important to remember, and I want to say this up front, is that it's not like a movie where when a movie is a huge hit, it's because it sells more tickets and it's really popular. I mean, this show is selling out the Winter Garden Theater, but it's not like shows haven't sold out that theater or other theaters before. The only way it's gotten to these incredible gross numbers is ticket prices like we've never seen before. And the clear trend here is that when you have a giant Hollywood star in your cast, you can charge way more money than we thought in the past and still have sold out theaters. I guess the one example I'll say is that the Winter Garden Theater was also where The Music Man played when it had Hugh Jackman. And that show, which was also a musical, was only grossing in like the mid 2 millions, low 3 millions range. And now George Clooney is grossing more than 4 million. Does that mean it's a more popular show? Probably not, but ticket prices are higher than we've ever seen before.
And I actually saw The Music Man when it was at the Winter Garden Theater with Hugh Jackman and Sutton Foster. And that's a big draw when Hugh Jackman is headlining as the lead role. I mean, people want to go for that A-list celebrity. And we've seen a theme this year where there are A-list celebrities in Broadway shows this season. So talk to us a little bit about who they are.
Right. So to your point, I mean, it's always kind of been a thing on Broadway to have a couple of shows with huge name actors. I guess what's different now is that these are the biggest shows on Broadway. So you have George Clooney in Good Night and Good Luck. You have Denzel Washington, Jake Gyllenhaal in Othello, and then Kieran Culkin, Bob Odenkirk, and Bill Burr in Glengarry Glen Ross. And those are 3 of the 4 highest grossing shows on a per week average of 2025. So I guess the difference was that, when you had last year, Robert Downey Jr., Steve Carell, Jeremy Strong, Rachel McAdams, Eddie Redmayne, there certainly is more of them, and that's a trend that we should definitely talk about why that is. But the difference is with Clooney and Othello and Glengarry Glen Ross is, again, high ticket prices, still being sellout shows, and those being some of the highest grossing shows on Broadway. And I guess I'll throw in Paul Mescal and Streetcar Named Desire, which wrapped up its run in April, so a little bit earlier this year. But really, there's a ton of options for people on Broadway if they want to see those movie stars acting on stage.
I want to talk about really how well these shows are performing at the box office because the 2024-2025 season on Broadway was reportedly the highest grossing season in history. Is it because of those high ticket prices? Is it because of the demand of those actors? I mean, what does that look like?
So Broadway as a whole is always going to have those tentpole shows. Hamilton is kind of a more recent one, but Wicked and, of course, Book of Mormon and, these shows that are going to be the highest grossing shows every year. They continue to do well. They're a magnet not only for tourists, but, New Yorkers and theater regulars alike. So those shows are always going to do well. The difference was basically testing out. If you're an investor in one of these shows, you're kind of pushing the envelope. How far can I go? How far can I go? When it comes to these ticket prices, and whether it's just this season, you've tried it in the past and it hasn't worked, or this is the first time they tried it, and clearly there's more of an appetite than we thought. The price of going to one of these shows, and we can talk about the specifics here, on the upper end. So we're talking the premium seats, up front or in the middle, all those great seats are now regularly between $600 and $900 first run. If you want to buy resale tickets to George Clooney and Good Night, Good Luck, I'll say again, good luck, multiple thousands of dollars probably, but $600 to $900 for those premium seats. And the get-in price is now between like $350 to $500. And, that's still playing to sold out theaters every single show. So that's really where we're seeing the difference with these three shows, is that they're continuing to be a draw no matter how high those ticket prices go. And clearly, if that continues to be the trend, then these small businesses, that is every production, have kind of like a duty to their investors and their producers to continue to raise those prices. So unfortunately, if you're a theater goer, I would say that the projection looking forward is that we're probably going to have higher ticket prices across the board.
I mean, these numbers are just incredible. $900 for one ticket to see one show at some points. So you're saying George Clooney's show was bringing in $3 million a week on average, hitting $4 million a week twice. Based on those numbers, clearly there's an appetite for this type of theater. And a lot of these shows, as you reported, have a limited run. They're running for a handful of weeks, 10 weeks, 12 weeks, things like that. Why do these short run productions with Hollywood A-listers, why are they so popular now?
Yes, that's a great question. And you're very right to differentiate between ongoing shows, long running shows, and then these star driven short run shows. So again, because you're talking about someone like George Clooney, Denzel Washington, Jake Gyllenhaal, have very, very busy schedules and also probably don't want to be locked in for upwards of a year, most of these star-driven short-run plays are only lasting between like 10 and 15, 16 weeks. And so because of that, if you're a production, you have to, try to make all your money back and reach recoupment of the investment within 10 to 15 weeks. That's very different than if you were to stage a new musical. The kind of rule of thumb there is that it needs to run for a year. So even Hugh Jackman in The Music Man, that is a star-driven show. However, he had to stay on for a year in order to recoup. And clearly that show made profits. I guess another example I'm thinking of is Daniel Radcliffe last year in Merrily We Roll Along, and of course Jonathan Groff. But that show had to run for a full year with that cast in order to recoup. So the main reason why these plays are becoming more popular is because you're able to recoup your investment on a more consistent basis and on a quicker time frame. So it's a little bit of a low risk, low reward proposition for investors, where you're not going to make massive multiples. I mean, if you invested early in Hamilton, you're making potentially tens or hundreds of millions of dollars, because that show's in several cities around the world and will run forever. These star-driven shows are only going to run for 10 or 15 weeks, and then they're done. Once the star's no longer in it, the reason for people to come out and pay high ticket prices isn't there. So you're obviously looking at more like a 10 to 20 to 30% return on your investment in success, in the greatest examples of success for these shows. But your risk of losing your money is near zero or very, very low. And so of course, fears of recession and in general, most Broadway shows do not recoup their money. In fact, less than a quarter on average of all Broadway shows actually return all the money back to their investors. So in that landscape, of course, if you can get an easy win, even if it's only 10, 20, 30% returns, you're going to do that every single time that you can.
I mean, if I'm an investor, I don't really like that statistic that if I invest in a musical, the likelihood of getting my money back is not looking too great. So talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, why exactly is that? What are the differences? Because I just saw a musical last night. I saw Moulin Rouge, and there's pomp, there's circumstances, there's glitter, there's an actress coming out of the ceiling, there's pyrotechnics. Is it way more, is there a lot more financial responsibility to run a musical than it is to run a play where the set doesn't take center stage really, when it's more acting driven, I guess?
Yeah, well, that exact reason that you're talking about and why you like Moulin Rouge is why musicals are the biggest generators of profit on Broadway. It's because if someone's going to spend a ton of money and come out, they want to have the pomp and circumstance, as you say. They want to have the glitter and the lights and, the chandelier falling from the ceiling in Phantom of the Opera, right? But because of that, musicals are significantly more expensive, both to get to opening night and then to run on a weekly basis. So again, just to put specific numbers on that, if you wanted to launch a new musical from scratch, it would take between $20 and $25 million. That's according to Forbes estimates, talking to people in the industry. $20 to $25 million just to get you to opening night. And then on a weekly operating cost basis, we're talking $800,000 to $1 million a week to run. So if you wanted to start paying back that investment, you would have to gross over $1 million a week. So it would have to be a success from the get-go that you would start to incrementally pay out those investors. And it might take a full year, again, to recoup. In the case of the success, and you're talking about Moulin Rouge, a show that's run for a long time, or again, we mentioned the Hamiltons and the Wickeds of the world. Those shows are like a lottery ticket. This is why musicals exist. This is why people still invest in them, even though there is such a low chance of success, is because when they hit crazy big number for the investors and for the producers. The key is, for every one of those, there's 3 to 4 to 5 others that, they don't even make it a year, or someone decides to cut their losses and they just fold it up and the show goes away. Now, in contrast to that, these short run plays, only take about $6 to $9 million to get to opening night. So we're talking a third of the cost of a musical, and their weekly operating costs are only between $400,000 to $600,000 a week. So roughly half, I guess, of what you'd say for a musical on a week-to-week basis. Again, that's for a very specific reason. This show's only going to run 15 weeks, and then it's going to be over, and it has to make its money back from then. But when I was talking to people that have invested on Broadway, they say that they do it, to be a patron of the arts, and they'd love to get their money back. They're not necessarily in it to make millions and millions and millions of dollars. So these little shows, I say little, but these plays that are non-musical and a little bit cheaper, if they can get their money back, they can get 10%. They're more than happy to do that if they think they're putting on a good show.
So to your point, if I'm a producer, if I'm an investor, I'm seeing a show starring George Clooney, I'm seeing a show starring Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal as something with little risk, high reward. How high is that reward? How fast am I seeing that return on investment? And what does that return really look like?
Yeah, so again, this season is kind of breaking the paradigm, or the what you would normally say for these type of shows. Normally it would be like, again, we've signed up Robert Downey Jr. for 14 weeks, and we hope by the end of that 14 weeks that we made all the money back that we put in. And if it's a little bit more, it's a little bit more. But now this season proved, with the hits of George Clooney and Denzel Washington and Jake Gyllenhaal and Othello, that we can continue to crank those ticket prices up. And now think about the economics of what I just said, where a play weekly operating cost might be $400,000 to $600,000 a week, but you're grossing $3 to $4 million in a week. You can pay those investors back very, very quickly. And in fact, George Clooney's Good Night and Good Luck recouped its initial $9.5 million investment in just 7 weeks. So then the next 6 weeks you're running, that's just pure profit going to both the investors and the producers. So I would say, given the success of these shows and given how much money there is to be made, I think you would be, if you're an investor or producer, you would be foolish not to be looking for the next massive star that you could sign up to do one of these shows.
So then let's now put ourselves in the shoes of these massive stars. They go on a movie set, they make easily a cool anywhere from 10 million to 30 million to do one movie for a couple of months. Then they're, on the flip side, they're in these shows, they're doing a performance a couple times a week, sometimes a couple times a day. I mean, how much money are they making, and is it worth it for them financially?
Yeah, I honestly, that question you just asked, I think, is the more interesting one, because if you're a producer or if you're an investor, it makes total sense. If you can get George Clooney for your production, then you're going to do it every time, right? But why is George Clooney doing it? We reported at Forbes, George Clooney is one of the highest paid actors of last year, and that was because he starred in a movie for Apple called Wolves, where we say that he made $30 million for that movie. If you're a star of that level, for a theatrical release movie, maybe it's $20 million. But of course, so much more than you can make on Broadway. We are estimating that George Clooney is getting $6 million across his run, but that's highly, highly unusual. He owned the underlying IP because he wrote and directed the movie that this show is based on. He co-wrote the stage play for this. He is a producer on the show, and then of course he's the star. So he's making money in several different buckets. The average Hollywood A-lister that's doing Broadway, we estimate only makes like $1 to $2 to $3 million for one of these short run plays. So again, if you're, let's say again, Robert Downey Jr., Steve Carell, and you spend 3 months of your life doing, a show, and you're only making $1-2 million when you can be making 20 plus million to do a movie, why would you do it? And I think it keeps coming back to, the purity of it, of acting. Oftentimes, if you're on a movie set, you might do a take for 45 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, cut, and then it's an hour, where they're setting up the next shot. And you really actually don't get to act that much versus if you're doing 8 shows a week that are, 2+ hours long, you're just getting to act so much more. You're getting to use that skill. Of course, there's like the famous saying in Broadway that says, movies will make you famous, TV will make you rich, but acting on stage will make you good, right? Theater, Broadway will make you good. So I do think there's a little bit of that, challenging themselves. That's certainly why Denzel Washington keeps coming back every few years to do it, is because I think he genuinely loves it. And I think we also can't discount the idea of you're acting in front of an audience that gives you a standing ovation every night. That certainly has got to help the ego a little bit. So why do these people do it? I think there is a prestige factor associated with it. Clearly, George Clooney is the toast of the town in New York right now, and that's why they do it. But the question is, of course, like how many stars will be swayed by that, will want to be doing it? Because again, if this trend is going to continue and even increase, there have to be stars willing to do it. They are the limiting factor. There's only so many of them, and they of course don't have to do this. There's very few reasons why they'd want to, other than them really, really wanting to get out there.
It's interesting because if I'm a producer, if I'm an investor, and I am investing in George Clooney, as you said, little risk, high reward. If I'm George Clooney or one of those A-list, there's high risk and little reward. I mean, a couple million is a big reward for a lot of people, but compared to a movie set, I mean, that's nothing. That's just a drop in the bucket. And I mean, you have to be on every single night. But I guess, I mean, who doesn't like an applause every day, standing ovation once a day? I mean, that sounds good to me. But you mentioned before in this conversation that this season seems like almost like lightning in a bottle. And do you think that's the case? Do you think we're going to continue to see this success and this business model? Or do you think we just have a really good right now run of Jake Gyllenhaal, of Denzel Washington, of George Clooney? Or do you think that, this success, this business model is going to continue and it can be just as successful with other A-list actors?
What I think is that they will certainly try. I mean, this is show business after all, and I think that producers are seeing success and they're trying to replicate it. So like one thing I saw was Harry Potter and the Cursed Child is bringing back the original actor who played Draco Malfoy in the original movies, and now they're bringing him to the Harry Potter and the Cursed Child stage show. Does that happen if the George Clooney Denzel success doesn't happen? I don't know. Maybe it does. I mean, it's a good idea anyway, but clearly that idea of box office appeal is something that if you're a producer, you're going to be reaching for, you're going to be trying to find. And the real question is, there is only a finite number of George Clooney's and Denzel Washington's. And if there wasn't that scarcity, if it was like George Clooney's going to be on here for a year, then there would be less demand for these tickets, right? So it really just depends on the star side, whether they want to keep doing it. The one thing I do want to say that's, I think, really interesting about this trend is that these star-driven shows are completely resistant to things like bad reviews or any other of the normal factors that would determine show's success. It really seems to come down to people want to be in the same room, with 1,000 other people seeing a George Clooney or a Denzel Washington perform live. And so, for example, Othello, the show that Denzel and Jake Gyllenhaal are in, didn't get great reviews. Now, Good Night and Good Luck got some really good views, some not so good, and kind of a lot in the middle. But I guess as an example I would point to is Robert Downey Jr. last fall in McNeil was like one of the worst reviewed shows of that year, and yet still was playing to sold out rooms, and the ticket prices weren't we're seeing now. But my point is, people want to come out and see these stars, regardless of maybe how good the show is, just because it's cool to do it. So I do think that if you're if you're a George Clooney, the risk isn't quite as much as you think. I mean, like, there's the idea of, oh, you'll be seen as doing this vanity project, and people will turn on you. It really doesn't seem to be that way. It seems like you're going to play to a full house, and everyone's going to appreciate seeing you perform live, and probably love that you were Iron Man in 2008, and care less about whether this McNeil show is any good. So I would say that maybe it's a little bit lower risk than you might think for the actor, but again, it is a substantial amount of time for them to invest. It's not just the 3 months that they're on, but of course, like the preparation and things like that. So it's a pretty all-consuming task, and we got to see how many stars want to keep doing it.
And I think another interesting component is that the price tag isn't deterring people either. People will shell out a couple $100, almost $1,000 to be in the same room as George Clooney, to be in the same room as these actors and see them perfect their craft live on stage. So do you see that these high ticket prices, they're not going anywhere?
If I were me projecting, yes, I would say that other shows may test out higher ticket prices because of this, just to see. The lesson that I'm taking away, like, as someone who loves movies and watches that box office, is just what is bringing people out is really no longer, the New York Times positive review or the number of Tony Awards that you're getting. I'm thinking about John Proctor's The Villain is the most Tony nominated play, non-musical, this year, and it's grossing less than $500,000 per week. And the reviews were absolutely glowing. So it's either going to be stars or it's, IP. So Harry Potter is a really popular show. Netflix is doing a Stranger Things show. We'll see how that goes. But Hercules is a show that's opening on West End, based on a Disney movie that probably will eventually come to Broadway. And so, yeah, so whether it's the IP that brings people out or the stars, I mean, this is starting to sound a lot like what makes people want to come out for movies, and it's not exactly based on just the show being awesome. And so I think that the trend of that will continue, and if that is the case, if that is why people are coming out, then I would suspect that people will test how high they can make the ticket prices. I guess it's unfortunate for your average person who lives in New York and wants to go more than once every 3 years or once on their one trip to New York City. And it's a kind of no expense spared thing. An $800 ticket is going to be really, really prohibitive to people on just a Thursday night entertainment. And so you could see the audiences for these things change over time.
And Matt, one more question for you. Based on your reporting, I mean, what echelon of star does the person need to be to demand that type of high ticket price? Because you mentioned John Proctor's The Devil. It got glowing reviews. It's nominated for Tonys. It has a star, Sadie Sink from Stranger Things. But as you said, it's not even clearing at some weeks $500,000. So what echelon of star do you think it needs to be?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question. And if you were to talk to Broadway producers, they would say, well, it's a mix, right? So Jeremy Strong's The Enemy of the People show did really well last year. Jeremy Strong, kind of famous, of course, Succession, did extremely well. He was Oscar nominated this past year, but he's not George Clooney, right? He's not Denzel Washington. So that show had positive buzz associated with it. But I guess I would just have people look at what shows that they would watch because someone is in it, or what movies they would watch because someone is in it. So Steve Carell is a great example. He was in Uncle Vanya last year. He's the type of guy that I'd love to go see him perform live. And if it clears that test, then it's probably going to work, right? Paul Mescal is a movie star. Of course, he led Gladiator 2 last year. He's not A-list. Everyone knows him, but the people that know him are huge fans, and they will want to go see him. And he's in a show like Streetcar Named Desire, and so people came out. So I would say the same test that you would use for a TV show or a movie is the same test that that producers are going to use. And I would say what they would do if you had a smaller actress like a Sadie Sink, you would still put her as the star of your show. You just wouldn't have those insane ticket prices. And then as the caliber of star goes up and up, you start to ratchet up how much you could charge, and hopefully still play to pretty full ribs.
Matt, really interesting reporting. I appreciate your time today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me.